views on this show.
I hope so, Coach.
Okay, well, it says that we're live. Look at that. No intro tonight, but that's okay because we have an exciting night. Welcome to the Play Callers Pod. It is Monday night. It is a special edition. It is the NFL Draft Panel 2022. As always, Coach Kirk Broussard and Coach Chris Williams. And we have a special panel here. We have Corey Yates, NFL Draft Analyst, Thomas Warren, NFL Media, Norman Locke, ESPN Radio. We have a jam-packed show. We're going to get right to it. So the NFL Combine took place over the last few days, and it was a great draft. A lot of needs from the Combine for teams. We can all agree on that. Not only were gold chains broken during a lot of the stuff that was going on, big records were broken, especially the 40-yard dash, dominating yet again. Now, everyone is obviously talking about Jordan Davis, jaw-dropping performance. We can agree on that as well. But we saw a lot of inconsistent plays, inconsistent efforts, and that may have downgraded some of the prospects across the team boards. And there was a few players that, they were ranked really high. So we're going to start things off with Corey. Gentlemen, by the way, thank you very much for joining the Play Callers Pod tonight. So, Corey, I want you to break down the top 5 overall offensive and defensive prospects and why. And if you are watching and you have a comment for the gentleman, or if you would like to interact with it, please do post, and we will get to you as soon as possible. Corey, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, everybody. Good to be here. So, listen, as you mentioned, Tracy, the Combine was a great event. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend in person, but as we all know, it's the event that helps us understand the athleticism of these prospects coming out. So it's a really good indicator for athleticism, but I take it at that, right? So in terms of that athleticism being able to translate to on the field, it's a little bit of a different story. So from my perspective, I take it for what it is. I think it's valuable information, again, for understanding the performance or the athletic ability of these prospects, but we have to turn that tape on and find out if these guys are ball players. And so your question was, who are some of my top prospects? I'm a former defensive back, former cornerback specifically. So I'm going to start there and talk about some of the guys that I like based on watching their film and some of the analytics that we actually provided on those guys. So I'll start with our number 1 overall corner, Trent Mcduffie. So this particular player is my top cornerback in terms of my board. Why? If you think about his ability, his versatility, I think obviously he's got some good length, but his versatility jumps out. You look at his film, technique-wise, he's very solid from a technical standpoint. But more importantly, when we run the analytics on him, number 1, he's got tremendous play speed. And so we've been able to verify his game speed at over 21 miles an hour, which is relatively elite for collegiate defensive backs. So that tells me, number 1, that he can run. So when you talk to coaches, they want to know, can these guys run? Secondly, when I look at how well he can transition. So this kid can flip his hips really well. He gets in and out of his breaks quickly. So his hips are very fluid. So we were able to measure his transition time in 0.37 seconds. So if you think about being able to flip your hip in less than half a second is pretty darn good, right? And so we really like how well he transitions. And of course, he was very productive at Washington. And then number 2 is Derek Stingley. So I think about Derek Stingley. I've got him as my number 2, CB2, if you will. Mm-hmm. The injury and some question marks on how he's going to come back from that injury is the only reason why I have him at number 2, because I'm not sure how he's going to rebound from that. I'm sure he'll recover, but I have to see it, right? I have to see how well he moves after the injury. But if you think about 2019, he was phenomenal. If he would have came out in 2019, he would have been CB1 coming out if he had that opportunity. Production dipped a little bit in 2020, but again, for my money, I'm going to have him at CB1, at CB2 on my draft board, and then Sauce Gardner, I've got as number 3, right? So I think he's probably consensus number 1 for most people. You know, I joke with Coach Aaron Fletcher, who's out there in Arizona State now. He and I had a good debate about whether or not Sauce should be CB1. I have him as CB3. Of course, he's got the length. He moves well, so he's got good movement skills. I like that, but just for me, the only reason why he's not number 1 is just because I didn't see that twitch that I like to see out of my guys on the outside. And then he played boundary corner. So my only question about that is how well, because when you play on Sundays, you know, that boundary, there is no boundary, right? Those hash marks are narrow. So he's gonna have to cover a lot more ground. And I'd like to see a little bit more twitch out of him. And then Elam, I've got as number 4. I think he's probably the most consistent corner. I think he's got a tremendous amount of upside. Again, versatility. And then McCreary, I've got as my CB number 5.
Interesting. Coaches, what are your thoughts on this? Any questions for Corey?
You know, I like Sauce being in your top 5. I think people have fell in love with his length. It's so rare that we see a cornerback that tall that can move the way he moves. So, but for me, I think Stingley would still be my CB1. I wouldn't hold that injury against him. You know, if I were in that general manager position, Stingley would be the first DB off the board for me. Number 2 for me would probably be Elam. And I'm not biased because I'm a Gator. It's just because I've watched him for 3 years.
Always got to get that in there.
And I know what he brings to the table. I know he's tough, he's physical, he's long. He ran a lot better than a lot of people thought, you know, running a 4.39. I think his hips can be a little stiff at times, but I think they're a lot more fluid compared from his freshman year to his final year at Florida. So I think he's constantly improving. And the thing I like about Elam is the pedigree comes from his father played in the league, his uncle played in the league. You know, he's going to go in understanding how to be a pro. He's a guy that you don't have to worry about off the field. He's going to be available because he's a hard worker. He probably was the hardest worker on the team. He has Kobe Bryant-like work ethic about him. He's a man of God. You know, you won't have to have problems with him off the field. So from a general manager seat, putting my investment out there, I think he would be the safe pick, you know, combined with one of the most talented. But other than that, I really like your top 5.
If you're just tuning in, this is our special Monday night edition, the NFL Draft Panel 2022. If you are watching us on Facebook at the Play Callers Pod, or you're tuning in through another link that we have set out through a different media outlet, and you'd like to comment, let us know. If it is past the show, we will make sure that all the panel gets all the remarks, all the comments. Again, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Chris, did you have any final thoughts on Corey's top 5?
And I thought it was an absolutely outstanding top 5. I think he's dead on with. I think Corey. I think you're dead on with Sauce Gardner. I mean, with the lack of twitch that you necessarily like to see for what we would think would be a shutdown field side corner, right? I mean, you'd like to see a little bit more twitch, and I think that really showed up, you know, in his drills. I mean, I can only imagine, you know, what that shows up, you know, in your results and your analytics, but just, you know, from a normal scout's eye and watching some of his drills, I mean, he almost in my mind, you know, not just a boundary side guy, he almost looks like a safety, you know what I mean? So I don't know if he's necessarily, you know, benefiting from, you know, I know there's a lot of hype around him. He's got the nice nickname, you know, Cincinnati had a really good year this year, you know, but I agree. You don't necessarily see the twist that you'd like to see from that type of a guy. And then, you know, I also agree that Derek Stingley, you know, would probably be the, you know, cornerback 1 there. I mean, he's, you know, clearly one of the most talented guys, you know, we've seen come out in a long time, you know, but a guy who I watched in the combine that I really thought, you know, showed well for himself and ran well, tested well, was Trent McDuffie out of Washington. I thought he did a really, really awesome job in his in his drill work. I thought he tested well. So maybe not necessarily the prototypical size that you like to see, but a really, really solid corner. If I'm going to draft a guy, if I'm going to draft a guy looking for a guy to have a 10-year type of career, I felt like McDuffie might be that guy or one of those guys.
Yeah, he's a safe bet. I mean, I think if you're to Coach's point earlier about, hey, if I'm sitting in that general manager seat, you've got a part of the science of the draft is try to mitigate risk as much as you can. And so that's the only reason I had, Stingley as CB2. Mm-hmm. But you talk about Sauce. When I turn the tape on, I think the thing that, again, for me being a corner, a former corner, I saw him in trail position a little bit too much for my personal liking, and he's a little grabby, right? Which tells me he doesn't trust his speed. And so I think, that's something that he can easily clean up with coaching and some off-season work. And if he cleans that up, different story. But, it's hard to coach length. And we know that length is at a premium. So I get why there's a lot of hype around him.
Here's a question, Corey, if I can jump in real quick. Yeah. Corey, what do you think from your experience perspective? You see somebody like Sauce run a 4.41 at the combine. Obviously, it's different than game tape, but when you see that 40 time based on what you see on film, how does that line up with how you see him as a player?
I take it with a grain of salt because, candidly, hopefully nobody's invested in combine stock, but candidly, I can finesse the combine, right? I mean, the way that these times are, we saw incredible times by these athletes, but a lot of that has to do with advancements in the training, right? Now you think about the training that goes involved in all these guys are doing once the season is over with. They're preparing for the draft, and guess what they're doing? They're spending the majority of their time preparing for that one event that we put a lot of stock in. And so 4.41, okay, he didn't play that fast on film, I can tell you that. That much I can tell you. But yeah, he trained well, dropped a phenomenal time, looks good on paper. But I got to see it on the field. So I take it with a grain of salt because, again, just the advancements in the training, the nutrition, and things of that nature, which, oh, by the way, if you notice, a lot of those guys didn't perform. They scratched on the 20 and the 3-cone. And the reason why they did that was because typically when you peak from a straight line speed perspective, right, you're giving up that lateral agility and that lateral speed. So they're very smart because they've got trainers that says, hey, we're going to peak. We're going to make sure you peak on this 40, drop a good time, and then we're going to scratch the change of direction drill, the shuttle and 3-cone, and then you can do that during your pro day, right? Then we'll go back to the lab and we'll work on that change of direction. But it's very hard to do both very well, straight line speed and change of direction.
Yeah. We have Corey Yates, NFL draft analyst, Thomas Warren from NFL Media, Norman Locke, ESPN Radio. Doug is saying hello to everybody. Thanks, everybody who is tuning in on our special edition of the Play Callers Pod. Now, Thomas, thank you very much for joining us. You were at the Combine for the last couple of days. Let's get your perspective on the top prospects. How did they look from your perspective, and what was the overall vibe that was going on at the Combine?
Oh, was that to me? I cut off.
Yeah, sorry, Thomas. Yeah, Thomas.
The vibe was like being at the Indy 500 because all the 40 times are coming in so fast. It was every group was. I think the receivers, the couple of the DBs, they had set records since records were kept on 40 times. And then what's interesting is because we saw times coming in, so we kept asking like, what is it? They're on turf, and we found out that that India changed their turf in 2020, so it was a little bit of a faster track out there.
Interesting.
But it's interesting the point you made, Corey, is that in looking at the wide receivers and talking to my colleagues, the 40 times were fast, but there was no real correlation to the vertical and the broad jump. And this was I think the lightest group of receivers that we've had at the combine. So the consensus was, yes, these guys are fast, but the explosiveness may not be there because their verticals and their broad jump numbers didn't correlate with their speed. So you got speed, but they may lack the explosiveness that you need to see on the next level. So there's a lot of talk, in thinking about what you were saying, is, the combine is one thing, and you obviously can take measurables and it's numbers driven, but it's how does that explosiveness line up with speed, and then does it translate to tape, and then obviously you take it to the next level. Are these guys who are running 4.3s, 4.4s, like a Chris Olave who ran a 4.39, but maybe didn't have as impressive vertical and broad jump numbers? Does he have the shiftiness? Can he separate at the next level? So those are still questions with the receivers specifically, and talking about just maybe not the top line, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson types. The talk has been there's depth at the position, but so you may not get a guy, top in first round, but you got some depth second, third, and fourth, where guys, again, they may not have shown that explosiveness, so they may slip a little bit, and then it's how do their skills translate to the next level. So those are still the questions just in that group, because they have the most buzz coming off that first day with so much speed, that there's still some questions about how they will play at the next level.
Coaches, any comments for Thomas? I mean, you had front row seat to everything there.
I think over the years, the combine has been something that's really attractive to talk about, especially when guys are setting records and proving how athletic they are. Mm-hmm. But I think ultimately, in my opinion, I want to get a baseline from the combine just to show me that you have NFL athleticism. Like, I really don't care if you ran a 4.4 or you ran a 4.2. For me, the 4.4 is good enough, because ultimately 80% of my evaluation is going to be from what I see on tape. So if you can check those boxes of being at the level of what I expect as an NFL athlete, I don't care if it's a 4.5 or a 4.3. For me, it doesn't really matter. I want to see, what did you put on tape? Can you stay healthy? Can I count on you to be there? Are you going to be available? And then ultimately, can you be a difference maker with your football IQ, with your dedication to the game, which, for me, that holds more weight than, a underwear Olympics, which is basically what the combine is.
Yeah.
I like the sound of that. Now, Thomas, you did interview prospects. So what was the interaction with them?
Well, I kept looking at it from their perspective, and that you had guys, they'd have to do, the guys who did it, bench press in the morning at 10 a.m. and then had downtime and had to come back at 4 o'clock in the evening to then do all these drills. And so by the end, they weren't done till 10:30 at night. And so I kept asking guys who came over, like, what do you guys think about this being late in the afternoon? And it was, I don't even know what time it is. From some guys, it was, I'm just tired. So it's hard where these guys are expected to perform, because this is a job interview from all these guys, right?
Sure.
And the way the days were structured, it just seemed, on top of just the natural probably nervousness and meetings that they had and tests that they had to do, to then say, all right, now get on the field and perform. Mm-hmm. I'm just impressed that they were able to do it, and guys did as well as they did, considering, and I'm out there at 9:45 and I'm seeing guys lined up to run 40s, and that's just not normal. Yeah. So a lot of guys, I think, were just, they're doing what they had to do. They were enthusiastic. All of them were great, and they handled their business. But to the point of just the combine itself, it's hard to gauge in that environment how that translates to them as football players, from my perspective.
I fully agree with Tom, because talking to some of the players, wake up 5 a.m. in the morning, have to sit through medicals all morning, then you come in for interviews with the media, and then go to do the bench press, and then kick off Thursday, have to go back to the field and work out. And then, like you were saying, the workouts were from 7 o'clock to as late as 11 p.m., and in my thought process, I'm like, we can consolidate these days and these times and these interviews into like 3 days. I don't think the draft needs to be as long. And that's what, like Thomas was saying, it's kind of a disadvantage to some of the athletes just to go through hours like Kenny Pickett. He missed talking to the media because he was wrapped up in medical for so long. And then to turn around and have to go and do more interviews with GMs, do more private workouts with GMs and coaches. It's just, I don't know, this year seemed like a disadvantage to some of the players.
I know that came up in conversation before when we look at the races and you look at what they're pressing and you see what they're doing at the combine versus how are they actually going to perform on the field? How are they actually going to perform in the game? So when you say that, this was a disadvantage to them, how would you have tweaked it? Because Norman, I mean, again, ESPN Radio, you're covering this as well. Tell us about your experience with this, because we're seeing the same thing happening.
I think,
hey Norman, can you improve your lighting a little bit?
Right now, what's funny is I'm locked outside of my house.
Oh no!
Yeah. So yeah, I'm so upset, but it's football, so I love it. So I'm here. But what's going on is I think the talks have been talked about moving the combine, and when you talk about advantages and disadvantages for the athlete, with it being in Indianapolis, everything is walkable. You have hospitals that are near. You have Lucas Oil Stadium is near. The hotels are near. So if an athlete wants to go from his hotel room to medical to the field, it's all walkable. Well, if you move the combine to a different city, let's say LA, which they're probably trying to push it to LA or Dallas or New York, hospitals aren't that close downtown LA. SoFi Stadium, the traffic to get to SoFi Stadium, it's going to be ridiculous. And that plays into like we were saying, with the athletes have to wake up so early to just go throughout the NFL's schedule, what they want to get the athletes to do. So if we was to say this past combine, athlete woke up, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, start stretching, warming up, talking to his agent, talking with his trainer. Well, 8 a.m., they have to start talking to the media. So you have to get prepped to talk to the media. So that's taking away time from your thought process of performing at your best for the job interview of your life. You know what I'm saying? Then you have just different things that might weigh on players. You got players that have some off the field issues, some that have medical issues, some that's not participating in certain drills until their pro day. And then like Corey was saying, you have the agents doing a little mystical, we're going to run the 40, but we're not going to run the cone. We're not going to bench press, but we're going to do it at our pro day. We're going to make everything sound good. Mm-hmm. And I just feel as though if you was to put all medicals on one day, you let all the athletes go through all medical testing on maybe Tuesday. On Wednesday, you do all interviews on Wednesday. Thursday, you do all bench press on Thursday. I think just need to consolidate everything into one event on different days. But I do understand the interview is into selling, and they need to sell ads. They need to get sponsorships, and I think that outweighed the advantages of the athlete of consolidating all the events into a couple of days over a week-long tender.
And now, Norman, the next question we have for you: did you see any sleepers out there? Did you feel that there was a prospect that maybe the media has missed over the past few days at the combine?
Like everyone, I don't use the combine to catch sleepers. If an athlete performs above, like, Coach Kirk was saying, above NFL athletic standards, then, it raises a little eyebrow and makes me go back and look at more tape just to see if it correlates with the tape. But I'm big on the interviews and talking to the players and kind of seeing their mindset and how they talk, how they interact with the media. Are they supremely media trained? Are they genuine? Are they authentic in what they're trying to say? Are they just coming out with the standard, I talked to all 32 teams, I'm going to do this on my pro day? I'm more into the person of the player. Like, I really enjoy Malik Willis, talking to him with his interview. I enjoyed talking to Kenny Pickett when he did make himself available. Jordan Davis was a great interview. I'm more so listening to the players talk than actually the performance that they do. If it's like you said, if you run a bad 40 time, I'll look at it more negatively than looking at a 4-2. I'll go back to the game tape. So to just pick out sleepers, I wouldn't just pick out any just from the combine, but I do say of this wide receiver class, it's amazing.
Now, I mentioned inconsistencies with plays and efforts that has maybe possibly downgraded some players across the team boards. One in particular, people are talking about Kayvon from the Oregon Ducks. They're saying he did not perform to his peak. He is a beast. We know he's a beast when he comes to, the look, the feel, the vibe, the plays. But there was something that was off. Gentlemen, did you see something with that? Or is there another player that you can say, yeah, I agree, they had a lot of inconsistencies and it may have downgraded them in this?
Yeah,
I think Kayvon did pretty well. I mean, he had, I think, the highest bench press of a D lineman. He ran a 4.58. From what I've heard, he did great in his interviews. He's a very thoughtful guy. So, what's interesting, he even made the point, because there was a lot of talk about his motor. He doesn't have the motor. And when he compared himself, or made a comparison to Jadeveon Clowney, it was, oh, well, why are you comparing yourself to somebody who has shown to maybe not have that consistent motor? But I thought it was great. In our interview we had with him, he specified, he said, no, I only made that comparison based on his measurables at the combine, and saying, if I can look at somebody like that who was the number one pick, if I can match that or better him in his numbers, that's what I'm striving for. Not saying he is a Jadeveon Clowney type player. He said, no, I model my game after Von Miller, a guy who everyone knows has that motor. And he's talking about things he has to work on he has that first burst, but now he's working on the second and third, because he sees that's what's made Von a Hall of Fame player. So there is that question about, does he have the motor all the time? I think he sounded like he knows the player he is. He knows what he needs to improve on, and he's a freak athletically.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a guy who is if he gets it all together, I think is going to be a superstar at the next level. Even if measurables didn't match up at the combine.
I don't know who's advising him, because he made a comment and said that his game is similar to Jadeveon Clowney. And if I wanted to be a first pick, I would say that.
Right, but that's what I was saying. In the interview we had with him, he specified he was just talking about the numbers that Clowney put up at the combine.
Okay.
He wanted to beat that because that was the number one pick. But his game, he said, he models his game more after Von Miller than Clowney, which I thought, to your point, was important for him to make that distinction.
Yeah, for sure.
Corey?
Yeah, I think I had a question for Thomas or anyone else on the panel. What's driving the narrative about Thibodeau not loving the game? Did I miss something somewhere? Where did that come from?
I'm still looking for it.
Go ahead, Coach. Go ahead, Coach.
Norman, did you have something to say? Sorry.
No, I was just chiming in. I'm still looking for his lack of love for the game. It never showed up to me.
Yeah, because I'm not close enough to the media to know, kind of what drove that.
I think he's a hell of a player. I think he's a hell of a player if he can stay healthy. But I think the narrative that you're hearing is he tends to put off the persona that he's a guy that's a little bit too smart for his own good. He's the type of player I feel like if you draft him, he'll do a Barry Sanders on you. 7-8 years, he'll hang it up, because he understands CTE. He understands the risk. And I don't think he wants to be a guy that's going to be in it for 14 years, a guy that's going to be a franchise guy for a long time.
Okay.
When you're paying a guy a lot of money and drafting him that high, you want him to be your guy for 12 to 13 years. You don't want him to hang it up in 7-8 years. Sure. And he strikes a lot of teams as that guy that wants to protect his health, and he'll hang it up early.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because when we look at the numbers, our numbers, he's by far the most athletic edge rusher when we run our analytics on him, right? And we measure things like how his get off, how quickly is he getting to the quarterback. We're measuring things like his contact speed, his closing speed. So everything about his game jumps off the film, and it jumps off the analytics in terms of him being able to get to the quarterback in under 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, holy cow, you know, him being able to close and play in space extremely well. And so his bend. So, you know, everything about this guy, other than the intangibles, right? And I didn't know that. I didn't have that inside knowledge. Screams, this guy is he's edge rusher number one. And, you know, based on the analytics, based on his athleticism and his upside, because you got to also remember, if you look at his athletic background, he's still raw. You know, you compare his game to Aiden Hutchinson, which we have him number 2 on our board. Mm-hmm. Aiden is very polished. He's got the best hands of that particular position group in this draft class. He's got a hell of a motor, and we know that. We know Aiden's mental makeup is great. You know, we know that in speaking to the coaches at University of Michigan. So his mental makeup may be the difference in why some analysts have him 1 and Thibodeau 2.
Yeah. I mean, for me, Thibodeau is one of the best, and I hate to mention him in this same breath, but athletically and from a potential standpoint, he's one of the best I've seen at his age, because he's young, to Lawrence Taylor. I mean, and I'm not saying he's Lawrence Taylor, and I'm not saying he's the next Lawrence Taylor, but potentially, if everything came together with him staying healthy and everything else that's involved with being a pro, he could potentially be one of the best you've ever seen. But again, does he love football? Is he going to be around long enough to fully become what we think he can become?
Interesting point. Sorry, Coach Chris Williams.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, the great thing about this whole process is that everybody has a theory, and really nobody's theory is wrong, really, right? I mean, everybody goes into it with a thought process of what they want to see. They compare the numbers to future things that they think can happen based on the numbers. But at the end of the day, man, I mean, it comes down to what's going to happen with these. At the end of the day, when you look at it from a coaching standpoint, what's going to happen with these kids once they get into programs and once they start to develop? I mean, if I go back to a point that Thomas made earlier, and we're talking about, and I just like to talk about this stuff. So, you know, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. I just like to debate it. But when you compare speed, say, to vertical jump or even the broad jump, you know, if I go back to the kid, I think it's Tyquan Thornton. Tyquan Thornton runs 4.28 out of Baylor. You know, for me, that makes me go back and want to go back and do a little bit more homework on Tyquan, even though his vert and his broad may not have been extraordinary. At the same time, that's a guy 4.8 speed, decent size. And I look at that guy at 180-ish pounds, and you tell yourself, okay, that's a guy that if we can develop that guy, if that guy can gain the level of professional strength that he would need to play at the level, then I could probably take that 4.28 and turn that into a guy who would be fairly explosive if we develop him at the proper pace and in the right way. And I think the thing that's happening with Thibodeau is just sometimes on film, you don't see the motor. I mean, it's sometimes on film, if I'm a coach and I'm watching that, if I'm a scout and I'm watching that, sometimes you don't see his motor. I mean, there's sometimes where he turns it down, and that would make me ask the question, does he love the game of football? Because he's not playing, in my opinion, he's not playing every down the way that the Hutchinson kid is playing every down. The Hutchinson kid is pretty much tapped out athletically. I mean, he has developed himself. There's not going to be much more athletic development in that guy, but the motor is 100% running. And I think that Thibodeau, the motor isn't necessarily running 100% of the time. And so you ask yourself, how is that going to happen? I mean, he's either going to be a Lawrence Taylor or he's going to be, Clowney. Clowney. So you just hope that, these kids get into situations, and then they also have to want to develop, and they have to want to be the best and that sort of thing. But for right now, man, it's all projection, and it's fun to talk about. And I guess 5 years from now, we'll all be able to say were we right, were we wrong.
Yeah.
And it's all I like to look at these. Right?
I like to look at these kids from a trajectory standpoint, and in comparison to somebody I've already seen come through the league that reminds me a lot of this kid on the field, off the field, mentally, athletically, and how they look on tape. And when I see Thibodeau, from what he's showing so far, I mean, I know him and Clowney are slightly different body frame, but I see Clowney from an effort standpoint, from an athletic standpoint, it seems like Clowney. And back what we were talking about earlier with Sauce, the defensive back. When I look at Sauce, I see Antonio Cromartie.
Yep.
From a body standpoint, from a skill standpoint, from a ceiling standpoint, I think that's about what you're going to get.
Now, when y'all was saying about taking plays off and effort and, referring to him maybe pulling a Barry Sanders, y'all don't have any questions or worry about Derek Stingley? 2 years removed from the best of his tape. His medicals, he still hasn't been able to really fully practice. I mean, he said he's getting closer and closer to 100%. But, I mean, if we want to just be frank about it, we haven't really seen the excellent level cornerback one-ish film since his freshman year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think and that's why I had him at 2 on my board. But his ball skills are just absolutely elite. And at the cornerback position, you want a guy that can run and who has excellent ball skills, right? Those two things, in my opinion, are non-negotiable. And so, man, you just have to bet that what you saw in 2019 is still there. But to your point, Norman, it's been since 2019. So
yeah, and I, just talking to him in interviews, you being a former cornerback, I just don't seem like he has that dog in him, that chip on his shoulder. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't know what it is about him when there's other drafts where you have, these boisterous cornerbacks saying, I'm the best. I'm not giving up another touchdown. I'm not doing this. And Derek is kind of just flying under the radar. He's just like, I'm trying to get healthy. My grandfather playing the league. I'm trying to make him proud. But I'm just scared that, like you said, what's the love of the game? I don't know. It's just something about him where it's just like I haven't put my finger on it yet.
I think he loves the game. His vibe for me is that he loves football. And I think he has dog. I think he has those intent. I think if he's healthy and he fills out a little bit more, I think he's Darrelle Revis in that type of lane. If he's healthy, I think that's the only question mark on him. Can he stay healthy? And I think if he fills out a little bit more, he'll be more durable.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, and Norman, you hit it on the head. I think what the combine, other than the drills and the testing, right, to gauge athleticism, the real value that I see in the combine are two things: the medical, right, and then also understanding the player, because you guys know a lot of times when you miss on someone, you miss on the person. You don't necessarily miss on the player. And so sitting across from that prospect, looking him eye to eye and asking the questions that help you understand their mental makeup, there's an art to that, right? We're in analytics, but I'm a big believer that evaluating players both in art and a science. So you have to balance the two. And that's where I see a lot of value in the combine are those two things.
Right. Well, if you're just tuning in, thank you very much for joining us here at the Play Callers Pod for a special Monday night edition of the NFL Draft, the combine that took place over the last few days. We have Corey Yates joining us, an NFL draft analyst, Thomas Warren, NFL media, Norman Locke, ESPN Radio, Coach Kirk Broussard, Coach Chris Williams. Thomas, I know you have to kind of get to your next meeting shortly, but let's go back to the media side of it and being on Media Row, being involved. You have a different interaction with the players. And I know you touched on that a little bit earlier, but let's go back to that. I mean, there was a lot of records that were broken, a lot of athletes that probably shocked themselves as well, because you don't necessarily go in there saying, yeah, I mean, you would like to break the records, but when you do, what was the vibes when all this was going down?
I mean, everything we're talking about is projections, and it's what teams want, right? So teams value different things. And as we're talking about what players are doing out there, what numbers they're putting up, and you look at a guy like Jordan Davis, who at 340 plus pounds, I would say was probably the star of the combine. And so it's and he set records for the fastest 40 for a guy over 310 pounds, the longest broad jump, the longest or the highest vertical. So that's a guy who may have coming in looking at maybe a 27 to 32 pick into the first round, just based on those numbers, may have, what I've heard, shot himself up to the top 20. And we're talking about, that's a couple $1 million for a kid.
Yep.
So that's the value in the combine, that guy now has his profile raised. Now, obviously, he has to continue that at a pro day and to the draft, but that's the flip side where it is a benefit to be there. But then you look at a guy like Kyle Hamilton, who I think a lot of people have as maybe one of the top players in this class. And he comes out, he runs a 4.59, and after that it was, he's not as fast as we thought he was. But then he has a 38 or 39 vertical jump, and it's like, oh, but he has an explosiveness. So it's really, and he's still going to be a top 10 pick, but that's the thing with the combine is, what do teams value more? Do they value the speed? Did that turn off some teams? But then they see his broad and his vertical, and they'd say, okay, that's the guy we want. But ultimately, it's like what you said at the start, Corey, that's a guy who the numbers, you're like, but then you turn the tape on and you say, okay, yeah, I know what he can do on the field. So it's ultimately the tape is what drives it. But being at the combine, again, it's what teams, everybody has a different flavor of ice cream they like. So, some teams like vanilla, some want chocolate chip. It's just a matter of what they want. And that's from hearing different teams and talking to our folks who are experts. When numbers were coming out, they were hearing different things from different teams, which ultimately drives everybody back to the same thing is, all right, let's put the tape on and who do we see? And that's the determining factor over everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a long couple days, no matter if you were watching it on TV or sitting there or a part of it. I know I was glued to it. I was watching everything, and like you almost become obsessed when you're sitting on your couch, and then you realize the whole weekend just flew by and you did absolutely nothing but watch TV. I had definitely no shame in that. But let's go back to final thoughts here. Norman, let's get from your perspective. ESPN radio, everyone here. The best part about everyone in this panel is you're seeing things differently. We are all watching the combine differently. So was there anything else that you wanted to cover that we didn't touch on?
I just want to ask what everybody thoughts of about the quarterbacks. Watching them throw, I was able to watch them in Lucas Oil Stadium, the quarterbacks and the wide receivers work out. And at first going into this draft, I didn't think truly there was any first round talents for the quarterbacks. Now, being drafted in the first round and being a first round talent, two completely different things.
Right.
After watching them work out, I do think there's at least 1.5 prospects that's a first round talent. Now, I do think maybe up to 3 quarterbacks can be drafted in the first round, but I think that's teams making a reach. But I do think Kenny Pickett, even with his hand size being small, hope he gets some type of cool two-glove nickname, kind of like Teddy Bridgewater. But other than him and Malik Willis, I truly don't think there's any first-round talents in this year's NFL draft.
Interesting. Well, it's going to make it hard, isn't it? Corey, anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get to?
You'd asked about sleepers at the combine, and I'll throw a name out there that I think I had a chance to see this kid live at the East-West Shrine practice and game, and that's a wide receiver that I think is going to just do a tremendous amount of work at the next level, and that's Kyle Phillips at UCLA. I think he's going to have a productive career as a slot receiver. When I look at receivers, I like to look at how well they gain separation, how quickly can they get in and out of breaks. And our data suggests that this kid is going to have an opportunity to be a very productive slot receiver at the next level. He gets in and out of his breaks very quickly. He creates separation. And so, again, I would just say, for those who don't have Kyle Phillips kind of on their radar, he's not going to go day one, obviously, right? But I'm telling you right now, this kid is a player, and I think can have, a 10-year career in the league.
We love hearing those names. And then when we hear it, we're going to be like, yes, Corey said that. And we'll all be reminded of this moment. Thomas, any final words coming from you before I unleash the coaches?
My sleeper was probably the D lineman Amari Barno from Virginia Tech, who had 246 pounds, run a 4.36 40, which that's just crazy to be that big and run that fast. And he had a 10 foot 11 inch broad jump. So maybe not a first day guy, but when I'm looking at a guy like that, maybe he transitions into or develops to maybe a Leonard Floyd type, who off the edge can have some speed. Maybe he bulks up a little bit, develops some power, and maybe not the first couple of years, but maybe year 3, year 4, he figures it out as a player and becomes a guy who may not be, Von Miller-like, but maybe a Montez Sweat type, who's going to put up some productive numbers and be a consistent starter in the league. So he's one guy that jumped out at me over the weekend.
Interesting. Great conversation tonight here at the Play Callers Pod. Again, gentlemen, I can't thank you guys enough for sharing your time with us. Now, Coach Kirk Broussard, Coach Chris Williams, I'm going to unleash you now.
I'll go first and let Coach Broussard have the final stage there. But I kind of like where Norman was going with that. First of all 3 guys, absolutely wonderful to have you here today. We appreciate you coming, and the thoughts and the insights are just awesome. So just know we appreciate it. I want to piggyback on what Norman was talking about the quarterback spot. And in my opinion, and I've been this football guy, and I've got my own thoughts on how things go, but I think the quarterback position is one of those where we always want to find that diamond in the rough, right? Mm-hmm. So we're really always searching. We're trying to find that guy that nobody's ever heard of, and the guy who was maybe not known coming out of high school, and the guy who's going to be this perennial Pro Bowl type guy. And I think the Malik Willis is getting a little bit of that, so he's a small school guy. He's at Liberty. He's playing in a really good system, but I think people are maybe putting a little bit of too much on what that future and what that high end is going to be, just because you want to reach and you want to find that guy that you think is going to come out of the woods. But I when I'm looking at it, and I don't think there are any true first round picks. I think that you're going to have to take a guy in the first round, but if you compare it to other years, some of these guys would be third round guys. Yeah. But if I'm looking at the position, I really like Desmond Ritter. I mean, the kid tested well. All of his tests are right there high end athletically. Based on what people like to do offensively now, and you're looking for that athletic guy that understands the game, that has been in a really good system, has been coached by some really good offensive people. I think that Desmond Ritter is a guy that, of all these guys, including Matt Corral, including Kenny Pickett, and all these guys, I think Desmond Ritter, if he gets in the right situation, that's a guy that may have that 10-year type of career, and that's a guy that may have that type of development that you're looking for, and a guy that could be that athletic, sort of dual type guy. So me personally, I'd take Desmond Ritter before I take Malik Willis. I think Malik Willis has a potential of being another, I don't want to say it, but I'm not even going to throw a name out there, but I'm just going to say
do it. Do it.
You teased us already.
I got a name for him.
I'm looking at him as a possible Carson Wentz type of a guy. You go and you grab him from the small school. You're kind of hoping that these big things are going to happen. And I'm kind of looking at that Malik Willis may not be the guy that everybody thinks he is, but I think people are missing a kid. Desmond Ritter's played some really good winning football at Cincinnati. And like I said, tests are right there athletically with some of the best we've ever seen at the position. I think that's a guy that's slipping through the cracks, but it's not a heavy draft when it comes to quarterback. For sure.
When I see Malik, I see Tyrod Taylor. I see, and I think that's his ultimate ceiling. I think he could win you a bunch of games. If you need to get a full season out of him, you might could get to 9 wins with him. But I think Malik could play, 10 years as a backup fringe starter, as a Tyrod Taylor type. But Ritter, the only knock I had on him was during his interviews, he compared himself to be a mixture of Deshaun Watson and Ryan Tannehill. And I'm still trying to figure out what he means by that. I know he's biracial, but I'm still trying to figure out what he means by that.
He's not far off on the Deshaun Watson comparison, definitely. I don't know what he means on the other one, but
He might need another minute to think about it. Coach Kirk Broussard.
All right. So,
Uh-oh.
I mean, just listening to everybody. So I have experience firsthand with Tyrod Taylor. And I'll say, just to go to what you said earlier a lot, Tyrod Taylor, he's never gotten his just due. He's never really been, I don't think, given a full opportunity to show what he can do. But I think Tyrod Taylor is one of the most gifted quarterbacks I've ever been around.
I agree.
Especially from an accuracy standpoint. And I worked with him in Buffalo, and he was one of the best I've seen. So I don't think Malik Willis can ever be on that level. I can see the comparison because their games are similar, but I don't see Malik Willis ever being anywhere near that level. My sleeper, since we're throwing out sleepers, I have two of them. And I think it's going to depend on how the chips fall. But because if you look at Drew Brees, when he was in San Diego, he was good. But when he got to New Orleans under Sean Payton, I think he became legendary. Sure. And I think if Matt Corral falls in the right system with the right quarterback developer from a leadership standpoint, and what I've seen from him, because I've watched him since the 10th grade. And in the 10th grade, he wasn't very accurate. In 11th grade, 12th grade, he threw quite a bit of picks, and he wasn't extremely accurate in high school. But the jump that I've seen him make in college, he's became a lot more accurate. He's a gifted leader. I think he has heart. I think he plays with a lot of heart. And I'm not comparing him to Drew Brees, but I think if he fell with the right quarterback developer in the right system, you could see a starting quarterback that does some really good things that would surprise some people. And then a guy that I think that can last 10 years in the league and really shock some people and really do well, I think it's going to be Damien Pierce. When you look at his yardage per carry, it's off the charts. When you look at all of his ratings from Pro Football Focus, it's off the charts compared to other running backs. When you look at how he tested at the combine, I'm not sure how he ran, if he even did run. Obviously, he's strong as an ox. And I think he was greatly underused at Florida. And I think in the league, you're going to see Damien Pierce with a 10-year NFL career and do some really good things. And so those would be my sleepers that immediately stand out. I do agree with you guys. It's a weak quarterback draft. There's no one I feel confident that I would pick in the first round. We all know that. But teams are going to reach because teams are desperate for that guy to lead their team. So, overall, man, I think it's a deep draft, in regards to other positions. Mm-hmm. I hope teams don't get enamored with looking at Jordan Davis and think that a big guy like that running a 4.78, that's not going to help me. I looked at his 10-yard split. That's what I want to see. How fast
the big guys dominated pretty much. How
violent is he at the point of attack? I could care less if he's running a 4.78. When is he ever going to get the opportunity to do that in the game? Does he take plays off? Does he play hard? Is he coachable? And then just to kind of recap on what we talked about earlier, with the grueling day that the prospects had with this draft, a lot of these guys played in Division I programs. And you know how a Division I schedule is. You wake up early, you're in weights, you're in class, you're in practice. They're kind of programmed and used to the grueling days. The combine's a little different because a lot of times you're up at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night doing multiple interviews. So your sleep probably is affected. So I can see that. But I think when you're that young, man, you just go through it. And I don't think it's that much of an impact. And these guys have been, if they go to a good development system like Michael Johnson or one of these places, they train them for the day and how grueling it's going to be. It's a complete training program. So I think the guys are ready for it. And I think that's why we saw some of the great performances that we saw, in addition to what Corey said earlier, with the training being so far ahead of times from what it used to be. So, I'm just really excited for the draft. I want to do a draft party and see where these guys fall, man. It's like Christmas in the NFL.
Yeah, we may have to do a little bit of friendly bets leading up to that.
We may have to come back with this panel after the draft. That'd be cool.
Yes.
Don't invite Calvin Ridley.
There we go.
So I just want to say thank you very much for joining the Play Callers pod here on our special edition of the NFL Draft Panel. We are honored to have, obviously, Coach Kirk Broussard, Coach Chris Williams. We have Corey Yates, NFL Draft Analyst, Thomas Warren, NFL Media, Norman Locke, ESPN Radio, and of course, I didn't even say my name the whole night. I'm Tracy Lynn. I'm part of this too.
The boss.
You're the glue.
So, yeah, thank you guys so much. And we're definitely going to have to pick up where we left off to see what the predictions were, what you guys are saying, because all of us are watching this very differently. So it's been a great evening. Thank you very much. And if you are watching this on a replay and you do have questions or you want to chime in on something that one of the gentlemen have said, just post away and they will respond. So thank you very much. If anyone has any last minute things, I know, Thomas, you have to leave. But if anybody has anything else, then that would be it for the panel this evening.
Appreciate the conversation. This is great.
Thank you, guys.
I'll do it again.
Thanks, guys. God bless everyone.
All right. Take care.
Have a great